Dr. Marcus Collins, welcome to the Brand Innovators Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I
Yeah.
feel very, very honored to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here too. I wanted to start. You obviously just got off stage talking about culture. That is kind of what you speak about and what your book is about. But I wanted to start with what you just mentioned to me that you start your classes with, which is perspective.
Yeah.
So let's start there.
Yeah. See, I'm a firm believer that the world is not objective, it's subjective. That we see the world through our own meaning-making systems, which the literature referred to as through our own cultural lenses. Anais Nin is attributed to the quote that we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are, right? Things aren't the way they are the way that we are. And the way we see the world ultimately informs the way the world manifests. That's why for some, a rug is decor, for others, a souvenir, for some, it's a place of worship. Which one is it? It's all those things, depending on who you are. And therefore, the objectiveness that we think is the world, the objectivity that we think is the phenomenal world in which we live in, is far more subjective than we give it credit. And the better we understand that, I believe the more licensed and prepared we are, empowered even, we are to navigate through it with great agency.
So you're trying to get your students to see different perspectives and to sort of widen their aperture of how they're seeing the world?
Yeah, I mean, particularly undergraduate students. I think I was a terrible undergraduate student, terrible, like graduated by the skin of my teeth. And when I got my master's degree, I was like, I'm never going back to school. This is it. And I was a mediocre, I was an average master's MBA student, but I did really well in my doctoral program. Like I excelled, like won awards, excelled. And it's not because I was any smarter. When I realized that I learned how to learn. And that's what I think the undergraduate program is for. It's not about a vocation, unless you're going to a vocational school. But if you're going to a college or university, you are there to learn how to learn. And that is, you learn the critical skills of having great critique, about analysis, really about establishing a perspective based on the literature that exists and the facts that present themselves, such that you're able to make meaning of it all. So for my undergraduate student to say, we're going to talk about strategic brand management, we're going to talk about social media, we're going to talk about digital marketing. But the most important thing I can give you is a perspective on these things, so that when you go out into the world, you now have a frame of reference, a way of making meaning of the world. The skills you might learn here will probably be obsolete in the coming years. The technology you'll learn how to use here will definitely be obsolete. I mean, I'll tell them that the algorithm is going to be different by the end of the semester before than it was when we started. But the perspectives I will give you will be long lasting. Why? Because they're rooted in humanity. And one thing we know is technology moves fast, but people move very, 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 very slowly.
They really do. It's interesting. I think that if you think about how people have interacted with brands over time, I think that it used to be very much, or at least I'd love your perspective on if this is true, that it used to be that brands had a POV and they pushed it up to you. And now it seems like, at least I know what you talk about a lot about in the work that you did with Beyonce and the work that you've done with other brands, is it's like, no, actually, it's more of a pull. It's more of an invitation to engage with your what you call congregation.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that in terms of the shift.
It's a great question. When we look at the history of brands have evolved over the years, over the decades, the centuries even. The initial brands were used as a mark, right? If I had cattle, there was no difference between my cattle and your cattle. But I sing to my cows at night, so there's love flowing out of the milk. And I want to make sure that you choose mine over yours, so what do we use? We use a branding iron as a way to signify ownership. It was a mark of ownership. In fact, if you translate brand into any Romantic or Germanic language, it translates into mark or marque or marca.
Right.
Right, so brands are marks. And over time, what happens is that we went from marking cattle to using marks as a way of trade, that I will mark my products so that you know that this shampoo is mine versus someone else's. Obviously, that wasn't the case, but So the idea was about there were these trademarks. And by the 1800s, late 1800s, we started to see some legislation happening in Northern Europe, particularly in London. We also saw it in Paris, in France, that there was legalizations for these trademarks. So these trademarks now became legal marks. right? So I legally own this thing.
Mm,
So we saw the first legalized trademark for a brand was Bass Co. It was
I didn't
the
know that.
yeah the alcohol company, the beer company, and then later on, not that far, like a couple years later, you got Coca Cola, et cetera, et cetera. So then brands were sort of these legal marks, but then over time. People start to attribute these associations, these cognitive associations to them. It's like, oh, I buy that brand, that legal mark, because I know it's going to perform well. I trust it. So these legal marks became trust marks, right? It's saying no one's ever got fired for hiring IBM. Those are the vibes,
Right.
right? Like I
Yep.
trust it.
Hmm.
And then so brands would focus on the value propositions of its products so they'd be much more trusted. My razor's sharper, my battery lasts longer, my car goes faster, my shampoo will give you body. I don't even know what that means, but I hear that all the time in the ads. Right? So the idea there is that I trust this brand. But then over time, especially around the 1980s here in the States, we got this like surplus of consumption, and consumption became extremely conspicuous. Right? Think of like lifestyles of the rich and famous. Like
Totally.
in the 80s, everything was about bigger, brighter, bolder, more conspicuous. And these brand marks became ways by which we signified identity. Who we were, right? Particularly how we want to be seen. You start seeing brands use celebrities as as a proxy for who they are. And the idea there is that people will fall in love with the brand based on what the brand sort of signifies,
Right.
right? And that's how we got love marks, as
Hmm.
Saatchi puts it, right? But today, the most powerful brands transcend just being loved, but they become extensions of our identity, who we are,
Sure.
how we want to be seen, how we project ourselves, and the like. And culture becomes a powerful way of doing that. So if you like rewind all the way back to your
Yeah.
question here, is that so? What does this mean for brands when it comes to consumption? And what does it mean for brands who try to connect? Is that brands have always evolved. They've always changed. And understanding, having a perspective of that change empowers us as marketers to engage with them. And it gives agencies to consumers to choose the right brands that are the best fit for them.
And I think that goes, I've heard you talk about the head, the hand, and the heart.
Yeah.
That, the hand is sort of, more transactional. The head is a little bit more rational. And then the heart is sort of like, that's where we are today.
Yeah.
You have to connect to people's heart.
That's right.
How do how do you coach brands on that today? Because that is hard.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. None of this is easy. I mean, it's like losing weight. The concept is really easy. Eat less, move more. But it's really hard to do.
Right.
The same thing goes here. It's that we have been taught, one would say indoctrinated as a discipline to think about the product and its value propositions. And the brand is just a way by which we mark ownership as if this were the 1800s,
Yeah.
right? But for brands to be a signifier, this vessel of meaning to conjure up thoughts and hearts and thoughts and feelings in the hearts and minds of people, you have to be more than the product. This is almost sort of like the product comes secondary. People come first.
Right.
The thing is, we don't know people very well. And it totally subverts everything we've been taught. Everything that's like Philip Kotler-Lee driven from marketing, this approach, this perspective, it usurps all of those things. This starts with a simple provocation. C.C. Chapman says, start with the soul and end with the cell. Start with the emotional, which is
Right.
responsible for the lion's share of the decisions
Mhm.
that we make,
Mhm.
and then end with the rational. Like that
Yeah.
is not the way we've been taught to think about marketing just 20 years ago.
I know. I mean, I've been in B2B marketing for a long time, and I
Oh
think one
gosh.
of the challenges that B2B marketers often face is they're like, oh, they're more rational buyers, or oh, they need to know all of the
That's right.
head, and there is no heart whatsoever. And sometimes I'm like, they're still people. You still have to get to the core of what they want. You still have to understand, and you
Mhm.
can't just push your own messages at them. You have to think about the human and
That's
go
right.
back to the human.
That's right. And B2B, to your point, beautifully stated. I mean, they are like the worst the worst atrocity participants in this, because we reduce people to being a transactional bot in the world of B2B without thinking about their humanity.
Totally.
I mean, again, we go back to this idea of no one's ever got fired for hiring IBM.
Right.
That is a cultural decision.
Sure.
That means inside the organization, we have decided that IBM is acceptable, that IBM is acceptable for people like us, that people like us buy from companies like this. Therefore, there's, I don't know, Equimini Computing that like, ooh, they got better products, it seems like, and they're cheaper. But if I take this to my boss is going to be like, are you smoking crack? No way we're going to do this.
Right.
But if I brought IBM, my boss is going to be like, cool, great, go with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
There's a reduction in risk when it comes to my own social currency.
Right.
It's easier for me to sell them through. It's easier for me to get buy-in. And my boss goes, I like that Marcus guy. So we're less likely to take a risk on another company.
Yeah.
That is all emotional. That's not rational at all. I mean, it's
Right.
rationalizing,
Right.
but it's all based on fear and risk mitigation. B2B is just as encumbered
I know.
with the dynamics of culture as B2C.
I know. Sometimes I ask my team, I'm like, would you watch that? Just use that as a simple test.
But truthfully, we should be telling B2C marketers that too.
Totally.
We do an ad, we go, do you really think anybody's going to buy from that? Do people see themselves
Do you
in
like
that?
it?
Come on, exactly. It's unfortunate, but I think that's the biggest anemia in marketing is that we don't understand us.
Yeah. Well, how do we better understand us? Like, and how do you teach your students,
Yeah.
to understand the human first?
It's applied empathy. This is empathy. And it's a simple concept, right? Empathy is about seeing the world through the lens of someone who's not you, someone who makes meaning through a cultural lens that is not your cultural lens. This is about denying yourself, taking off your lenses and see the world through someone else's perspective. And when we do that, we go, oh, I may not agree, but I understand. And that self-aware perspective taking allows us to see people for who they are, their humanity, interact with them, engage with them in a way that pays honor to it, even if I don't fully agree.
So one of my favorite things you talk about is when you were working for Beyonce, you wanted to start the fan club, and you were going to you guys created this whole idea and this strategy, and I think you even took it to market to go forward with the
Entourage.
Be Entourage.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
And then what happened from there?
Yeah, well, so there wasn't like the outward expression of her fan club. That's just what we sort of refer to it affectionately. Like the Be Entourage is her entourage. And it's that perspective that led us to all the executional tactics that we did, right? Everything's about the fan club. If you're a fan of Beyonce, show up. If you love Beyonce, show up. And people didn't show up, not to the degree in which her celebrity would have demanded, right? Or would have suggest. And we're like, what's going on here? So teams started to sort of scour the web to see what's happening. And they stumbled across this community on the dark corners of the web, one would say, called the Beehive. And they weren't just fans of Beyonce. No. They believed.
Obsessives. Yeah.
But they believed. It's like even like, it's like, I refer to it in the book as like a congregation.
Yeah.
That they share the same belief. And because they share the same belief, they go, oh, that's our person. Right, that's our brand. That's our sort of the totem like status for people like us. And Beyonce, as an artist, she transcends her category. Right, the music that she makes, the way she presents herself, the kinetics and how she navigates through the world, are all a demonstrative representation of this idea of women's empowerment. And people who see the world similarly to her go, "That's my girl." That's far more powerful than I like her music.
Sure.
She can sing. Oh,
Yeah.
she can dance. Oh, she got some bops. No. This is far more
Yeah.
powerful than that, which I think transcends or translates over to how we think about commercial brands in the traditional sense, right? That you go, they're a good shampoo, they're a good car, or those are comfortable shoes, to being like, no, that's an extension of who I am, right? This is when we talk about moving from being a trademark, legal mark, love mark to identity mark. Like this is a way by which I subscribe my identity. I project my identity, not because I love her so much, but because of who I am, which leads to what I think will be the future of brand,
Yeah.
is that brands will be community marks, ways by which I not only project my community, but I project who I am among these people. And I think the Beehive is a perfect example of how a community of people engage with an artist, not just because they identify by them, but they feel like they are a part of a thing.
Absolutely.
Swifties are similar in nature.
Yeah.
I mean, Nike at one point used to have Nike run clubs, right? This is more than just I wear the sneakers and they're
Yeah.
comfortable or I'm an athlete. It's like, no, I'm an athlete in community. So unbelievably
So
powerful.
important. If you were taking those concepts and you were advising a brand that was really just kind of down and out, like the Democratic Party,
Yeah.
what are they missing? Like, why are they getting beaten so badly? Why are they not inspiring community? What is happening in that realm
Yeah.
that they're not, it's not grassroots. It's
Oh
not
goodness, where do we start? Well,
right.
I
I know
think
it's a big
no,
question, but
it's a great question though. It's a great question, but it is big. I think it starts with any brand, right? If a brand is a vessel of meaning, what does the Democratic Party want to mean? How does it see the world? What does it believe? What's its point of view, its ideology, the soul of the brand? It's not terribly clear. We think about the Republican Party more
clear,
more acutely, MAGA,
clear.
very clear, right? They preach the gospel, and people who see the world similarly go, "Yep." Even if the policies are to their detriment. Think about that. Think about that. I
100%.
mean, it's like I buy this brand because I believe in it, even though the products aren't that good.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many farmers right now that are like, I can't believe that these tariffs that are hurting me so badly. It's
That's
like,
right.
well, yeah, but because they were bought into the brand. So I was
That's
thinking
just
about
right.
that
It's
when I
like
was listening to you. I was like, how would you create that community and create that we stand for
yep.
this? Because we don't have it.
So I would start the Democratic Party saying, what do we believe? How do we see the world? Right? What's our ideology? Not the policies. The policies are byproducts, just like the value propositions are byproducts of a brand's point of view. What is the point of view of the Democratic Party? And how do we demonstrate that? But how do we communicate it through a gospel? And if you think about some of we've seen some politicians do this well. In Barack Obama,
Obama, yeah.
right? He believed that the people didn't have an issue with ideas or legislation. They thought the government was broken. They had cynicism. So what did he run on? Hope. Wow, right between the eyes. You know, Donald Trump. He said that, hey, we've gone too far. We've progressed too much. We need to go back to a time, a nondescript time, back to a time where he felt was more of the golden age of the country. So what we're going to do, make America great again. And people who felt that they were left out of the progressive movement that was the Obama administration, they go, yeah, go back to a time where fill in the blank
Yeah.
your bigoted
Yeah.
point of view. That said, Kamala Harris gets into the campaign last year, and she has a very similar stance as far as not being about the value propositions, but being about belief. So they have freedom, unbelievably powerful. Now you may say, well, she didn't win, but think about this for a moment. When she was the vice president and Joe Biden was still going to do a reelection bid, and they were saying he needs to drop out. They made a list of all the people who should take that seat, the who should run for president, and Kamala Harris was at the bottom of that list. And she was the vice president at the time. But they were like, oh, no, she's not ready for this. 2 weeks later, she raises $1 billion. She electrifies millions of people. The
Yeah.
energy is super,
Yeah.
that's not value proposition. That is
Yeah.
ideological congruence. People go, oh yeah, I'm with this whole freedom thing. I can get behind that. That's the move.
Mm.
I think that for the Democratic Party, there's a lot of, pontificating about policy, and that's important. That's important. But when we're talking about policy, it has to be communicated in a way that people can make sense of it,
Yeah.
right? And we're not rational human beings,
Yeah.
rationalizing human beings.
Yeah.
So we have to communicate in ways that people can say, oh, I get that. That makes sense. And it aligns to how I see the world for people who see the
Yeah.
world similarly.
Yeah. Well, we don't have it yet, but hopefully we will get there.
Fingers and toes
Um,
crossed.
I did want to ask you, you talk about passion and like passion, the root of the word passion, I believe is like struggle or something that like you bleed for.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that and why that matters when you're branding or when you're a politician or whatever.
Sure.
The thing that I'm gonna like, it may be yes, and that means I turn off all these people because it's a no
That's
for
right.
them.
Yeah. So the word passion comes from the theology literature, which means to suffer, like the passion of the Christ. For what are we willing to suffer? And we think about this idea of suffrage, whether it's because I just so convicted by it or I feel so compelled by it that you go, no matter what, even if I'm the only one, I'm going to stand on this. In the world of politics, we hear people talk about what they're passionate about. I'm passionate about education. I'm passionate about stem cell research. I'm passionate about curing Alzheimer's. I'm passionate, I'm passionate, I'm passionate. And I would say that oftentimes that passion is convenient. What we really want to get to is conviction. That when you have to risk everything, when you have to suffer, how likely are you to stand for it? And we see, a political landscape where people who have been long, long champions for a cause, very passionate about a cause, that they're able to flip very easily when it becomes inconvenient. And you go,
Right.
you weren't
You
passionate at
weren't
all. It was
passionate.
just convenient for you. It was a good talking point for you. It wasn't real.
Yes, and I think I've heard you articulate the Colin Kaepernick example with
Oh, yeah,
Nike. Nike is for athletes, and ergo Nike was for Colin
that's
Kaepernick.
right.
Or other, I'm sure there's other brand examples that you can think of where it's like they might have Bud Light, right? They turned off a whole segment of the population because they took a stand on
That's
something.
right. And then they double back. Then they say, oh, just kidding.
Right,
Good,
right.
just
And to your
sorry.
point, then are you sure you're passionate
And you're like,
about
you
it?
know, this isn't real for you.
Yeah,
It's all cosplay. And I think that like this is where the rubber meets the road. I mean, there was a time a few years ago when marketers were all about purpose-based market, purpose-based market, purpose, purpose, purpose. And I go, well, yeah, sure, sure. But I think conviction is more important because you can
interesting.
have a purpose
Conviction-based marketing. You
and not
should trademark that.
work on it. Trademark TM. I think that like purpose-based marketing is saying that we have something written, articulated that we supposedly want to live up to. Conviction is that, oh, we live up to it. I mean, it's an action-based word. We live up to this thing. I am convicted. I'm going to stand on it, even if I'm only even if I'm the only one, even if it means I'm going to lose customers because I believe in it. And then we'll find ourselves in when we see companies rolling back their DEI efforts is that you didn't really believe. It was convenient, right? It was convenient.
And how do you teach brands or show people when you're in conversation with them that like it's okay to take a stand, it's okay to take a risk? In fact, if you don't, it's kind of like that thing, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
That's right. That's right. I tell marketers this that if you have if you're convicted by a thing, say something. If you're not, shut up.
I think
Right?
that's a good like sort of
Very clear.
filter.
This isn't about jumping in on every
Yeah.
single thing. This is about no, we really believe in this. And if you believe in nothing, then you go, oh, okay, great. So you just want a transactional based relationship with people. Don't try to engage in their culture. Don't try to be more to them. Don't try to connect with them because you just want to sell a thing. So sell your thing. It's totally fine. But don't try to be my friend, Black History Month. Don't try to be my friend when it's like, when I love basketball and now you're showing up at basketball saying, hey, we love basketball too. So no, 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 no. It doesn't work that way.
Right, when you're looking at people as transactions. And that's like you said, it's fine if you want to look at people
Yeah,
as transactions, but
totally.
then that's your relationship to
That's
them.
right. That's right.
They're either a hand or a heart. I mean, a hand or a head. They're not the heart.
Exactly. Exactly. And if that's where you're going to be, if that's how you're going to perform, that's how people are going to see you. And you may not want that. You may want to do, I like the way Kim put it. You might want to do the hokey pokey, right? 1 foot in, 1 foot out when you're ready for it. But that's not how people are going to see you. They're going to be like, oh, I see right through this. I see exactly what you are. And we live at a time that I think social living is more conspicuous than ever before. In that I know where people work, what they drive, what they eat, what kind of shampoo they use, because we are constantly projecting our identity. And therefore, there has to be greater congruence between identity and consumption. If not, there is cognitive dissonance.
Right.
I saw on TikTok, there's a trend happening right now where people who drive Teslas are putting other logos on top of their Tesla logo.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's wild.
because so they spend tens of thousands of dollars on
To
a thing
have
they
this.
don't even want to be associated
Yep.
with. Like, because I don't want you to see this thing and think I'm like him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's really, really powerful. But that's what brands are. They're vessels of meaning. And meaning isn't owned by the company. It is constructed and negotiated by the people.
Right. That makes sense. I think that's why people have such a like an ick, especially younger people
Yeah,
have an ick when brands are trying too hard or
that's right.
pushing into something that isn't authentic.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We go, ooh, what are you
Yeah,
trying to
that's not
do?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The final thing I want to ask you is just if you had advice for your younger self, your 25-year-old self,
Ooh.
what would you tell yourself?
I suppose I would say to my younger self, you're not where you are, but if you keep going, you'll get to where you want to be. And by that I mean that we find ourselves wanting to do things like I want to be an executive, I want to be a speaker, I want to start a podcast, I want to create content. I want. And you will give it a try. And if it doesn't manifest immediately, we go, guess it's not for me. And you go, fam, are you kidding me?
I know.
Like, it's like going to the gym, doing a workout and
Once.
go, where's my six pack? It don't work that way. Like, this just takes
I know.
time. There is no elevator in life. Not for most of us. For the 1% maybe, but not for the majority of us. Like, it's only the stairs.
Back to the passion thing, right? It's
Exactly.
like, what are you going to eat every day for
That's
breakfast?
right. That's right. And it's so I would tell myself that I remember feeling, doing a lot of work in my younger years and feeling like, man, where is the result? Like, where is it? Like, I'm doing the thing, and why is everybody else, thriving, and I don't seem to be? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why is everyone else getting accolades? Why not me?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you got to stay in the gym.
I know.
That's
And
why.
you got to wake up every day and like want to just like, you know, grind through it.
That's right. My one of my previous bosses, Steve Stout, would say you had to fall in love with the pain of hard work, and I couldn't agree more. And I'm not like one of those like like
David Goggins types.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not me. I'm
Yeah.
not that like
Yeah.
you got to sweat it out in
Yeah.
20 hours and don't sleep. I'm not that
Right.
person at
Right.
all. But I do believe there is dignity in work. And there is dignity in consistency, and there's dignity in perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that anything that we get good at only happens because we do it a lot, often, repeatedly. And that goes for getting good at being good or being good at being mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell myself back then, it's like, don't be worried. You are running your own race.
Yep.
Like, keep your head off the swivel, look forward, and just
There's
keep
an
going.
element of faith there too, right? It's like you have to have faith in the work and yourself and the universe that you're going to be that you are going to keep going, and you're not going to see any
That's right.
signs for a long time on the
I
road,
mean, what is
but you got to keep
faith?
driving.
Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, right? And by it, the elders gain a good report, right? We don't see it. It's not right there, but it's just over the mountain. It's just over the horizon. If it were right there in front of you, you don't need faith.
Yep, absolutely.
But what did James say? Faith without works is dead.
Yeah,
You have all the faith in the world, but you got to do the work.
absolutely. Great. Well, Dr. Marcus Collins, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.